Hello, beautiful community. We've got a few questions about our favorite person in the world, Mr. Prigozhin, today. So we're going to have a go at answering them right now. Is Mr. Prigozhin a threat to Mr. Shoigu, the defense minister? I think maybe the answer to that could become more obvious as we answer the other couple of questions, but I think the first thing to say is that over the last few weeks, Kadyrov and Prigozhin have been making endearments towards Surovikin. And these haven't been publicly returned, naturally, but that is a certain kind of demotion, implicit demotion of Shoigu. The substantive questions now. Is Prigozhin a threat to Putin? And does Prigozhin want to be leader of Russia? I think there are a couple of parts to this. The wonderful commentator on Russian affairs and on this war, Vladimir Pastukhov, coined a kind of aphorism not long ago about Prigozhin, that Prigozhin no longer wants to be whispering into Putin's ear while standing. He wants to be whispering into Putin's ear while sitting down. And what I think that very clearly means is that Prigozhin has quite a lot of power. His power is real. It's not just some kind of a PR story. It's really real power. But it's completely unformalized and it has no official status. And that's a problem and a vulnerability for Prigozhin on which he needs to take practical action. And you see that in his commitment to trying to establish ties with different levels of the Russian state, or whatever is left of it, with governors, with people from the presidential administration, from people from the GIU. So that first part of the answer sort of softens the danger, because we're talking about somebody who is trying to both extend and also formalize their influence. But you've got to be clear that as the situation continues to destabilize, two things have got to be in our mind. Russia's own participation in the sort of, radical discourse in Russia is not something he's going to entirely be able to control over the year to come. And there'll be various people who are hardline who are going to try to leverage both Prigozhin and the possibility of gaps appearing between different power centers in Russia. So, in other words, whether he likes it or not, he'll be quite at risk of drifting into being at least complicit, at least partly complicit, with the radical opposition to Putin in 2023. And the story of 2023 domestically in Russia is that there's going to be more hardline opposition to Putin than anything we've seen before. But there's another, I think, important element here, which is just hypothetically obvious. Imagine, and let's not say that's likely, but imagine a spectacular degree of chaos at some future point when there's a transition beyond Putin. Are the National Guard, Zolotov's National Guard, the kind of institution that gives you the impression that they could try to take power? No, I don't think so. They're very good at beating up protesters and scaring potential protesters. But they don't have the kind of power that one would expect for anything like a military coup to happen. Well, does the military have that kind of power? Now, the military may be gaining power over time, but at the moment it still doesn't. And what you've got to understand about the Russian military is that the stunning levels of corruption-mediated incompetence aren't just a problem, they're also a feature. In other words, the weakness of the military in Russia is not just an expression of extravagant corruption, it's also functional. Yeah? It's there as a necessary part of what's needed for regime security. Okay, so where does this leave Prigozhin? Well, that leaves Prigozhin in a situation where he has a considerable military force that may be loyal to him, in the tens of thousands. A small fraction of that force has historic loyalty and a degree of historical experience working in Prigozhin's forces. That might be 10% or less, but nevertheless. And in the light of a weak military and a rather soft-edged National Guard when it comes to matters of revolution, at least, Prigozhin's position begins to look powerful and dangerous. So that's a little bit on this. And this is a sort of overlapping question. What's the ultimate goal of Prigozhin's private army? And I think that I certainly don't know that, and I doubt that Prigozhin does, and I doubt that there is one, actually. But that's not to say there aren't various kinds of scenarios that are being thought about in which this kind of extraordinary extrajudicial resource he has might prove very useful. I mean, just look at how extraordinary the situation is. I mean, basically, it's a kind of a bubble of monopoly over organized violence that is completely detached from the state. So it's a kind of process of distribution across Russia of the Chechen model of politics. And that's remarkable because, of course, we've talked so many times about Russia's move from an authoritarian to a partly totalitarian system, but a feature of authoritarian systems is that they have a special relationship with information. And a big thing that Putin is, really historically been all in on is describing completely corrupt political moves as though they were consequences of some kind of impartial judicial procedure. So Prigozhin is parasitic upon this imitative element, this normalizing imitative element of the Russian state that tries to persuade Russians that their society is a sort of a functioning, well-organized authoritarian regime with procedures that work. And that's an extraordinary situation. But as Prigozhin's position strengthens and as the Russian state over time weakens, he may need to use this force for defending himself, for defending others, or for attacking something, some body, some plan of somebody's or some set of institutions even. So all of that and the unresolvedness of it, and of course that there are all kinds of financial and mercantilistic interests involved, makes this a very unpredictable resource, I would say, even in Prigozhin's hands. And I have, by the way, been persuaded to watch Peter Zeihan's appearance on the Joe Rogan show. And I'm going to watch together with you, actually, the next chat, just the bit where he discusses Russia. And we're not going to be mean to Peter because he has extremely beautiful, raw scenery of nature in his films. But we're going to assess what he has to say and compare it with reality. Let's live talk soon.